everybody. This is Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with renowned bassist Rudy Sarzo. Now, I know that
Raul, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Everybody knows Rudy from a huge body of work, including Quiet Riot, Ozzy Osbourne, Whitesnake, Blue Oyster Cult. I mean, I could go on and on. It's all, you can read about it. But part of what we love to do, especially here, is get to know the musicians from the point of view of your journey and starting. And I know, I don't know if a lot of people know that, Rudy, you were born in Cuba, which is very interesting. And you came to the U.S. as a kid, around what, age 11 or something like that?
Almost 11, yes.
Almost
yes.
11.
Almost, yeah.
And
yeah.
So tell us a little bit. Again, it's always fascinating, the process that develops, that forms somebody, that gets you onto a path of music and bass. How did this happen for you?
Oh, very simple. When I was very young, let's say when I was almost, I had just turned 12 years old. And actually 13 years old, and the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan in 1960. I just turned 13. And I'm 60, so you don't have to do the math. Okay. So what happened is, I saw the reaction of the girls, being a kid. I mean, I was already playing guitar, and my musical influences being the Beatles were the Ventures, and then they have these country-ish shows like the Jimmy Dean Show, So any program on TV that had guitars, I would gravitate towards it. Mm-hmm. There was another show which was more about folk music. It was called Hootenanny. Mm-hmm. So those were my favorite shows. And then the Beatles came in. See, the Beatles, there was no mania, such as Beatlemania. So it was just basically musicians playing guitar and, having a certain reaction from the audience, kind of like, people enjoying the music. And it was mostly adults enjoying music, And then the Beatles came, and it was all about the kids. Music for kids, by kids. Because, the Beatles were really young. I think Harrison was not even in his 20s yet.
Wow.
He played on Ed Sullivan. I think he was 18 or 19, So it was really music from a generation addressing the young generation, kids, music by kids for kids, And to me, the most important aspect was how the group did to it. I thought, this is my ticket. This is the way I'm going to go because, I didn't have the killer instinct to be an athlete. There's a certain physical instinct that you have, to be to be in sports, that contact. I wasn't into that at all. Even though I was a big kid, I was 210 pounds when I was, in my early teens. Yeah, I was. It was all the Cuban food. Not only the Cuban food, but eating like 3 or 4 times a day, heavy meat. Later on in my high school years, I actually lost weight. Being a musician was not enough. You have to be thin musician. You have to, have a 60s body, which is different from today's physique, but that's the way it went. But anyways, so that was my big attraction to actually playing rock and roll, was the fact that, the opposite sex was excited about it, And it's really interesting because most of the kids that I started playing at that time will share that. We're all just basically playing for the girls. And it's interesting how you the journey of it all, how you start discovering yourself. You get to a point that, it's a lot of sacrifices that you have to do to become a better musician or a competitive musician. Because people that I mentor, musicians that I mentor, that music it's not a competitive sport, but there is certainly a competition aspect to it. Or as soon as you enter the music business, you're competing for that gig with everybody around you. So it's up to you. My point is, if you're not there to get the gig, don't even show up. The audition, or even if you got a band, you got to keep that gig. You can't back off. But anyways, so I found out about myself by being a musician. The fact that it's about the girls, and I've been married for over 32 now. So I found my girl a long time ago. So definitely I'm not playing anymore because of the girls. I got the girl already.
Yeah.
But even before even before I met my wife, it was all about being a musician. And even before I made a living from it, I was sleeping on the floors, having all of these sacrifices that I had to make in order to await that moment. You have to be ready for it, even though, because it's like you're this close to the gold mine and you keep digging and you really don't know. I mean, now there's tools to tell you how close, but back in the day, you just keep picking away, because if you walk away from that work that you've done so far, somebody else is going to come in and dig it, and they might be inches. There was no turning back. There was no turning back. And I'm talking about all the sacrifices that I had to do while I was living in Los Angeles, because I moved here, and at a time where the music that I played didn't have any future. I'm talking about during the Quiet Riot days with Randy Rhoads, to that. When Randy left to join Ozzy, there was like about a year and a half that I saw Randy maybe once or twice when he came home, break from Ozzy, to back home to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And back then we didn't have texting or Skype like we obviously now and stuff like that. So you wrote each other every 6 months. You sent a postcard. Hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm alive and well. Blah, blah, blah. There was no phone calls or anything. So to me, you don't become a musician and all the sacrifices. First, it has to be, you got to do it for yourself. Mm-hmm. For you. It's your journey. And what I wanted to do was to make sure that no matter what sacrifices I had to do, I couldn't bring anybody along with me, to suffer the consequences of what sacrifice I have to make it, And I took a different path than most people today, because when I was growing up, we didn't have these magnificent schools today, like going to Berkeley to learn music, or even local rock school. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that. Or, GIT, BIT in Los Angeles. We didn't have that. What we had was the club circuit in Miami. That's where I grew up and did most of my formative years playing around town, whether it was on the beach where all the clubs were, mm-hmm. and the number one musician around player was Jacko. I'm talking about the era where Jacko, before he even released a solo album, when Jacko was playing with Wayne Cochran and the CC Riders. Just a local guy, inspiring and scary at the same time. Because I thought there was 1,000 guys like that. I didn't know there was only one Jacko. I thought, well, if this guy plays that good, there's got to be 1,000 guys that play that good. So, it was inspiring, very scary. But the hardest thing was, how am I going to get that information to turn me, that information that enabled me to actually understand what Jacko is playing and what all of these other guys, because I was also in the same teen band circuit as Will Lee, mm-hmm. From the Letterman Orchestra, you know.
Yeah.
And Will Lee's father was the dean of music at the University of Miami. So he came from formal education. And Will was also an incredible singer, too. So, you know, it is, again, very inspiring and very scary. You know, I mean, I could have just said, forget about it. I'm never going to make it. But no, something about me inside of me say, okay, I'm not going to compete with these guys. I'm not, you know, become a fusion, you know, prog rock bassist. I love rock and roll. I love, you know, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, and all that. That's what I'm going to go after. You know, that style of music. But nevertheless, there was always a hunger to learn music outside of the blues-based rock and roll, which is what, you know, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and all of that. You know, I was always, as a matter of fact, even today, if you look at my Spotify list, I listen to Weather Report. This is exactly the same thing that I used to listen to growing up.
Sure.
But I did not pursue that path because I was not educated enough to learn that type of, you know, what Jack was playing. Which brings me back to today. I do have that information. This is all I do all day long. I go to websites, not only of basses, but also of just musicians who teach theory, harmony, you know, and that's my schooling. I go on the internet, YouTube, and there's a wealth of information out there. That's all I do. Pick up my bass I have next to me, and I watch YouTube videos, and it makes me a better player. Now, I might not be able to actually utilize that vocabulary in certain styles of music, especially what I'm known for, but it's for my own personal satisfaction and my own personal journey, because it fills me. It's really rewarding for me to be able to also speak that language, you know, more of the jazz, more sensational, you know, language of bass.
Got you. Now, growing up in a Cuban family, were you tempted to pick up some of the Latin influence, because there's a rich Latin musical heritage with, you know, the salsa and all the kind of Afro-Antillean kind of stuff. Have you ever been tempted to incorporate any of that into your playing?
Well, as far as the feel goes, I grew up with that feel. I mean, I left Cuba when I was almost 11. Mm-hmm. So the music that my parents took my brother and me and wherever they went. So we used to go to these better bands, you know, which is like outdoor concerts, you know, usually at the beach, and listen to Latin bands. I mean, to me, there's no better setting for a horn band, you know, with Latin music than outdoors in the beach, because you have the sea, the air of the sea, you have all wind, the breeze, and it's just blowing along with the horns and the music, and that's part of my childhood. Also, I used to go to sleep every night with, I used to live in Havana, right in the center of Havana, about a block and a half from El Mar, you know, which is the seawall that they have. And Piano y Trocadero. So it's basically, if anybody knows where I used to live, right there. Blanco y Trocadero is exactly where our apartment was, you know, and in Havana. And the kids' neighborhood would gather as soon as the sun set around cars. You know, let's say this is late 50s, so we're talking about the So's and whatever, and everything was made out of metal. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like today's cars are made out of different, you know, material. And so one kid would grab another one a hubcap, another one, you know, a door, the trunk, and it was like playing percussion. And then before you know it, they would keep adding kids. You know, that was kind of like the little hangout, you know. And that was my lullaby, going to sleep every single night. So I not only that I grew up, it's in my DNA. Do I one of the things that I really have to became conscious of doing it was that in a very metronomic world of heavy metal, was actually playing in front and behind the beat, and I had to like become very conscientious of that, because when it came time to record, the producers that I was working with, they didn't understand how I was playing, because they were used to basically guys with pick that were just like right on spot on the beat.
Yeah.
And I wasn't about that. I was the push and pull of playing, especially since again, going back to Miami, playing in Miami, we playing in clubs back in the early 70s. Our playlist was basically top 80. So I wasn't heavy metal. The only time you got to play heavy metal is if you got a song like Hall or Smoke on the Water that somehow to the top 40. So everything else that we played was just basically, anything from Johnny Cash to Paul Anka, You Having My Baby, and of course, dance music. But so again, there was a feel to it. There was some kind of funk, and then disco came in, and that's when I started getting into slapping, not extreme slapping like we have today, but more of the fundamental slap, that came from Larry Graham, with the Sly and the Family Stone and so on, and then everybody started picking up on that. That was the disco era, and so on, and it wasn't until I got to Los Angeles with Quiet Riot that I was in what I thought it was purely a rock band, because the guys that I was playing with, Kevin, Randy, Drew Forsythe, they had never been in a top 40 band. They never had to play, Casey and the Sunshine Band or anything like that. They were the covers that Quiet Riot did were very, let's say, humble pie. More like the British Invasion.
Gotcha.
No Motown or anything like that. No Motown, no soul, no nothing. So it was, I felt like in a very pure sense of the word, pure metal rock band around that time. And they did like my push and pull. They found that it was more like a John Deacon style of finger playing. Even though John Deacon also used to pick, but he had a lot of fingering, playing with the finger. And that's how I got the gig, because I was different from all the players in LA that were using a pick.
Gotcha. Now, moving also along, there's so much more to you than music. I understand you wrote a book about 11 years ago, and you're also involved.
Yes.
in computer stuff, in tech stuff.
Yeah, the CGI, I don't do as much as I used to, because it was probably, I got LASIK surgery for my eyes about 5-7 years ago, and it changed my life, because it got to a point that I couldn't see playing anymore. I was playing by numbers. And even if I wore glasses on, if you wear frames and you start playing on the higher, above the 12th fret, it's underneath the frame. So I couldn't really see that well, because it was possible. So I had really lost the joy of playing. At a certain point, about 7, and it happened slowly. So I would say for the last, about 10 years, I would say in the mid 2000, that's when it started to really deteriorate my vision. And I was playing it safe. I wasn't improvising. I was just numbers. So that's when I got into CGI, because I could always wear glasses, put my laptop in front of me, and be creative. Gotcha. That's what I needed, a creative outlet. Once my vision got corrected, and actually it's better than it's ever been, to point that I see the grain on my fretboard. I can see, I can see the winding of my strings. It's just incredible. It just gave me this passion for playing again. So I really, I look at my life as TikTok, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. I only got so many hours in the day, so I'm gonna put them all into music.
Gotcha.
That's all. Instead of like putting, dividing them into CG and this other thing. No, about music. Music and my family, of course. But sometimes, let's say when I'm sitting here in the sofa, and my wife is here with me and my little dog, and I'm playing, watching TV. I got my earphones on, and it's that balance to be able to be creative and be supportive of your family at the same time.
Gotcha.
Do what you love, and if you get the two things that you love the most, your family and your music, together, it's a blessing. It really is a blessing.
Gotcha. And that said, with this resurgence in your music, do you have any projects in the future that you're looking forward to doing? Something that you're going, this is something I've always wanted to do that I think I'll go at it.
Yeah, there's something I always wanted to do. I haven't found it yet or gotten that phone call from the people to participate. Mostly people might not know about it. I would love to be in a jam band.
Okay.
Kind of like, all those, there's a Sirius channel that's all about jam bands. I hear all, Humphrey McGee's and Mo, and I go, oh my God, I'd love to be in a band like that. Which is, it reminds me of what I used to play in the 70s, with the bands that jam. It's not metal or even pop. It's just like people get together and improvising. There's structure to it, but also there's room to grow musically. Bands like Fish. I would love to be in a band like that. So if there's anybody out there who feels the same way, just contact me.
Gotcha. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about gear, because every musician, to get your voice, it depends on what you're playing. What are your instruments of choice? What's your gear? What are you using?
Instruments of choice. I have my own signature model Specter.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I got it right here. I started playing Specter maybe 5 years ago when I joined what is referred as the Jeff Tate version of Queensryche, and we were performing Operation Crime. And listening to the record, I looked at the bass, which happened to be a Specter, to be a character in the whole storyline, because it's a concept album. The aggression and the definition, the tone, where it sat in the mix. And I was a different bass at the time, and I'm saying, I'm not capturing that. Because when you're doing when you're performing a piece like Operation Mindcrime, it's very theatrical and it's very emotional. From song to song, the storyline and everything. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so to me, all the instruments were characters. And so I contacted Specter, PJ Ruble, and they sent me a Euro, which is kind of very much. This is a Euro too, but it's my signature model. So I started playing, and of course now I have the personality. That character was coming out of my fingers, And I felt, and I never had gotten so great response from the audience about my bass tone before. And I'm going like, wow, okay, cool. I mean, I love the way it plays and it sounds, but one thing is you to like it, and other things for people to come and say, hey, I get it.
Yeah.
It sounds great. So I have been playing Specter ever since. I mean, I gravitate towards different basses that I own also, but my main bass will be this. All the basses that I play in recordings, because I do a lot of tracking for different projects at worldwide. And not only do I play the Specter, I play the I have Fender 5. I have a Marcus Miller Fender, a 59 Precision. I also have EB. Now it's called the Gibson SG, but it's I always call it the EB Gibson SG. A Thunderbird bass. Different 5-string, 6-strings. What I like to do when I sit down to work track, not just an album but a track, I audition my bass. Or cast them, because again they're characters. And what I found, that certain tone that fits in with the storyline and all the other instruments, the way that the frequencies fit, that's the one that I go to.
Gotcha. Now,
a lot of times I use a pick too.
Nice. The Specter you have has Sims pickups on it, and those are interesting in themselves.
Yes. Yeah. So we've been working on this signature model for a few years now, because I didn't want to just put my name on a Specter model that it's like the standard Specter, just because cosmetically that doesn't work for me. Every time that I have a signature model with Washburn or a PV, it's always been from the very from scratch.
Yeah.
With something from scratch, So I did not want to build something from scratch for Spectre. There's a certain iconic element to these bass. So I wanted to keep the essence of the instrument. One of the first thing we tried was actually a coda body, the more of that classic Fender shape, which is with the Euro neck. And somehow, because the coda is flat and the Euro is curved, they didn't match. So we scratched that. So the following year we were looking at this, which is basically, it's a Euro NS shaped body. But what I asked was to bring the scoop down here to give me full accessibility to 24 frets. I mean, real easy.
Totally.
Whereas with the Euro, the scoop ends like around here. So you gotta you gotta really force your fingers in there. But by doing that, what they did was they took sides and they moved them down. So now you have more body in the bottom. And when I had this particular bass at the NAMM a few weeks ago, I had a lot of bass players, give me their feedback. And a lot of them actually did like the mask, because they felt that, for fingerstyle, that they had something more to rest on.
Gotcha.
Back here, because a lot of us, we're playing a lot of fingerstyle. It just brings it's another tool. I mean, I can play really, really fast just by, doing fingerstyle, either doing my 3 fingers or 2 finger style, So it's another component that we bring to our playing. But sometimes certain instruments that don't have enough body mass back here do not make it comfortable to do that. Now, this one in particular, which is the prototype, the pickups are a little bit raised in comparison to the production model it's going to be, because they're still in the beta stages. And they're going to move the Sims pickups a little bit down so you can access for pulling, popping and pulling right here, because right now there's not much space. So this is all going to be corrected. And of course, these are the Sims. The last day of NAMM, not this year, but the last year, a friend of mine took me over to the Sims booth, and I got the first glimpse of these pickups.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God, this is exactly what I'm looking for, something completely unique that I can have on my signature model. And one of the things about Sims is his strategy is not only to have these picks on his own basses, the Enfield Lionheart basses, but also to make them available to anybody who wants to install them on their own guitars, whether it's their or Specters or whatever. I know Specter guys that have removed whatever pickups they had before and installed these Sims. Now, talking about the Sims, what makes it really is the fact that you can switch them, and once you plug it in, let me plug it here. The lights come on. There you go. I'm pretty sure you get it now.
Yeah.
The light comes on, and so you have all these configurations. These are okay. This is the Bartolini preamp, which is another thing that I decided to install on my the signature model, because first of all, I have a long history with Bartolini. I've been using Bartolini electronics since my first signature model with Washburn in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
I actually ate it because they built it when I was still playing with Ozzy. I used it on the Speak of the Devil recording. So that, and Bill used to wire the pickups for me, hand wire. So that's how long my history. They're wonderful. They're smooth. It's one of the very few, like for the bass, that actually captures smoothness. If you want to get more metal tones, and actually the aggressiveness of metal, it's all built in. To tweak it. So this one has active, passive. Active, you just pull it and it's passive. Active, and I have a blend and the bass and treble. But with the pickups, these are the Sims pickups. When it's red, it's Sims, and when it's green, it's single coil. So this is kind of like a PJ configuration right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's what the Euro, Spectre Euro comes with, at least, the ones that I have with the EMGs, But if you want to go, a lot of people are installing dual split pickups in their instruments, in their basses. Two reds give you dual split, and the blue ones are humbucking, and it has incredibly worn characteristics, but you can dial in the aggressiveness too. The preamp, the Bartolini preamp with a little attenuator that you can change how much drive on the preamp or how much less, you can tweak it. So it's incredibly versatile, just the fact that you can change each configuration of the pickup. Right here is the humbucker with a split, a single coil, or you can have like just let's say if you have your pick all the way to the front and just using your neck pickup, that would be like a precision. So, it's be diverse, and it's very different. It cosmetically looks like a Spectre, but it has some very unique features to it.
Very cool, very cool, excellent. Well, that I had a chance to see a couple of NAMs ago. Martin and Nick demoed those pickups, and the versatility is like having multiple basses without changing anything. So
absolutely,
that's
absolutely
just great. Well, Rudy, I don't want to steal too much of your time because I know you're such a busy guy. Last, I always like to ask, because you've got so much experience with the business, what advice would you give young players nowadays? Somebody who wants to follow in your footsteps, what would you tell them? What would the key thing that they should do?
Yeah, there's a lot of great musicians out there. Mm-hmm. Scary how great they are. But the people that get the gigs are the one who have the most trust factor.
Gotcha.
Build your trust factor. And it's not easy. There's no shortcuts. Experience. Let's say you come into LA. Let's say you or even in your hometown, you start playing around town. Yeah, you probably know about all the musicians that happen to be people that you don't want to play with because you can't trust them.
Gotcha.
For a reason. There's 1,000 reasons why you can't trust people, because they are hard to get along with. They don't practice. They show up late to the gig, show up late to rehearsal. They might have a substance abuse problem. It could be anything. So the less of a liability you are as a musician, because remember, you are a component of one big picture. Mm-hmm. Less of the liability that you are to that component, the more phone calls you're gonna get, because people, that's who we call people that we trust. Remember, a band is a family that you pick. It's the people that you pick, or they pick you, or it's mutual. You might get a phone call to join a band, and if you don't trust the band or trust people in the band, you probably not gonna come to rehearsal and join the band because it's like, and it's word of mouth. Nothing travels faster than a bad reputation. Also, a good reputation travels really fast, or maybe not so fast because people want to keep themselves. They don't want to spread it around, that so-and-so is like, wow, I called this guy because they want to call you, But there's a very small list that I have of people that I trust because I get a lot of calls from other musicians saying, hey, I need a drummer or whatever. And I have this very short list and saying, yeah, what did you call this person? Because what you're doing is you're putting your own reputation on the line when you suggest somebody. I know that because that's how I got the Ozzy gig. I got the Ozzy gig. I mean, there were 100 guys that could have played those songs. Yeah. But I needed a musician that could go on the road, that they would trust, was not going to be a liability. It's a trust that he's going to learn the song, he's going to be professional, he's not going to be a drug addict, a drunk. 100 factors. Randy could vouch for me because he knew me. He already played for over a year in Quiet Riot, and I spent a lot of time with him at his mom's music school, Busonia. So it was that trust that said, guys, this is what Randy told Sharon Ozzy. This is the guy that you're looking for. He can play this, and you can trust him. And that's how I got the gig. I can only advise people how to succeed by my own experiences.
Gotcha.
If I was not that trustworthy guy, I would have not gotten that gig, and we'd be having this conversation.
I hear you. Well, that is very sound advice. I think a lot of people are sucked into the glamour of being involved with music. However, the reality is that trustworthiness, back in my days when I played with a group back in Puerto Rico, we lost some very good musicians because they weren't trustworthy. And, that was the whole thing. When our little bus was going to go to do a show, if they weren't there, you needed to find somebody to replace them. That was just simple.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Well, to give you an extreme case of that, the greatest bass player in the world, at the time of his death, could not find a gig because he was untrustworthy. Jaco Pastorius. Have you ever watched the Robert Trujillo Jaco documentary?
I've got it. It's sitting on my coffee table, ready to watch. I'm almost there.
It's a must.
Yes.
As soon as we finish the conversation, turn it on. Yeah. There's a segment where Joni Mitchell, who had toured with, she runs into him somewhere in the Village in New York. Jaco is playing this little dumpy club. She goes there to watch him play, and she walked out because it was so devastating to see a genius, battling his demons.
Gotcha.
The greatest bass player in the world could not get a gig because nobody could trust him.
Gotcha.
So if you think that you can get away with partying and doing everything, think about the greatest bass player in the world. What happened?
There you go. That's very sobering thoughts and very good advice. So, like I said, Rudy, thank you ever so much for taking time to chat with us. People, stay on top of what Rudy's doing. All kinds of great things coming. And you have seen this interview coming to you live via Skype. That's why we've got, little blips and technical things, but it's just like having a conversation. You've seen it here on Bass Musician Magazine.